You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 280 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. We're heading to Lincolnshire today, although my guest actually manages farms in two different counties. I'm joined by Chris Baylis, who is Director of Farming at Sir Richard Sutton Limited, which manages and owns a portfolio of trading assets and businesses in the hotels, property and farming sectors. Of course, we will be interested in the farming sector bit today. Chris is responsible for managing the farming operations across Lincolnshire and West Berkshire, overseeing an acreage of around 6,000 hectares of mixed arable and livestock operations. In today's episode, we'll explore Chris's journey into agriculture, the challenges and opportunities of managing large-scale farming operations, and his approach to strategy. We'll talk about circular farming, the estate's soils and cultivation strategy, and Chris's general thoughts on the future of British farming. So, from soil health to technology and business resilience to conservation, there's plenty to discuss. Chris, welcome to Meet the Farmers. It's great to have you on the show. Can you start, I suppose, just by introducing the business as a whole? Give us an insight into the estate.
Yeah, of course I can, Ben. So I'm Chris Baylis. I'm the farming director for Sir Richard Sutton Limited. I'm based up here in Lincolnshire, just outside Market Raisin. I also oversee our estate down in West Berkshire as well. I've been here for 12 years now. It's a family-owned company, and we are a mixed company. We've got three main enterprises, as we call it, so property, hotels, and farming. I'm now the farming director, so I'm responsible for all the farming activities in the UK. And across the two estates, we are farming just below 6,000 hectares.
Give us a little bit more on the land holding itself. So context of different soils you're working, the different enterprises.
Yeah, so we're a mixed farming business. We're a large mixed farming business, which I wouldn't say necessarily makes us unique, but I suppose at the moment when we're looking at farming practices, I would see that as an advantage because we'll come on to that, I'm sure, in a conversation in terms of soil health, regenerative farming practice. It's quite good to be a mixed farm. Also, mixes the risk at the moment, a little bit more diversification. But yeah, we are operating a 6-year crop rotation. We grow predominantly combinable crops. We've got some sugar beet, we've got vining peas, suckler beef cattle, breeding sheep, and also we run a closed flock of sheep as well. And then we've got 30,000 free-range organic hens at the moment down on our farm in West Berkshire. And we're just investing in a new free-range poultry enterprise up in Lincolnshire as well.
Give us an idea of the team as well.
We've got a great team. I'm sure everybody says that, but no, we really have got a good team here. We've got a nice mix of ages, really, from young ex-graduates right through to people who have been with the business for over sort of 25 years of service. So a really nice mix of experience and enthusiasm at the same time. So we think as a company, especially if you talk to the family, that we always think we need to put the people first. And if we get the people right and their packages right and everything else, then profitability will follow. So, yeah, I'm very pleased, very proud of the team we've got here.
How has the estate and the business grown over time? Can you sort of tell us the sort of rough timeline of that?
Well, in terms of land holdings, we have grown over years, but our last acquisition of land in the UK was in 2011. Since then, really, we've been focused on adding value within the business through different diversifications, through looking at circular farming systems. I suppose for us at the moment, we think land prices in the UK are very high, especially when you look at the productivity in relation to that capital cost. So lower yield and returns. So at the moment, we're really focusing. We're quite happy with the land mass we have, but we're focusing on adding value within.
Circular farming, let's put the pause button on that. And I know that this is a core part of your strategy, actually, sort of going forwards with new and existing enterprises, shifting things, but also working everything together. So first of all, because different people have different definitions of this, what do you mean by circular farming?
Well, when we talk about circular farming, we're talking about a complete integrated system where one enterprise assists the other enterprise. So that's our sort of complete circular farming system.
Great. And how does that come into effect with what you're doing, and how do you see this moving forward?
Well, if I talk about one example at the moment, we are, like I say, investing in a new free range poultry enterprise up in Lincolnshire. Um, and that really will give us the opportunity to turn some of our feed wheat, which you could say is actually a bare commodity, turn some of our feed wheat into egg, which we believe is a sustainable protein in the modern diet. And then from that, we will then bring all the manure from the chickens back on the farm to grow the next crop to go back into the chicken. So a real surplus system. But by doing that, it's hopefully avoiding some risk because it's reducing our exposure to commodity volatility on the bare commodity market. Eggs are on a 3-year contract. Now, obviously, they have their own risks, but eggs are already on a contracted price. And then we're bringing all that manure back onto the farm. So obviously reducing our reliance on artificial inputs and also the fluctuations in price of artificial inputs as well.
With just a question on time, I suppose. With such a diverse estate in itself, and you've already run through who else is in your team, but how do you prioritize your time amongst these different enterprises, but also with an eye on the future as well, in terms of long-term planning and ensuring the farm remains profitable and sustainable over time? How do you know what the priority is, I suppose, at any one time?
I suppose it depends really on, where we are within the team. I suppose, as the farming director, my role is really to look at the strategy in terms of the future, the direction of a business, and then really kind of put that into practice with my team. So we have management meetings quarterly where we're actually looking at the direction of travel. We will have a look at our performance against forecasts, and then we will start to talk about the wider picture and where we want to go as a company. We've got strong leadership within the company. We've got a very nice family we work for. We've got a strong management team down in London in our central office. So, yeah, I think strategy is something we are always looking at. We always want to get better. We turn every single stone all of the time. And I think we've got to. The danger is you can become on a treadmill and just do the same thing year after year. But no, we're always trying to change and see how we can optimize, enhance, increase, make ourselves better.
Hmm. Do you think we talk enough about strategy in the farming sector itself? I mean, to listening to this podcast, we have a vast sort of range of different farming businesses in different sizes and scales and different size teams, different resources. But actually, when it comes to a strategic mindset, managing the long term, it's very easy to get swept up in the day to day, isn't it? Often in your business and often in farming, there's a lot of firefighting that goes on. So what is the role of strategy, and how would you ensure that you would make time for that?
That's a good question. I suppose we're quite fortunate because we are a larger business. We tend to have a larger team. So we can delegate, or I can delegate the day-to-day operations of the farms to the farm managers. And then that really gives me a clear desk then to actually monitor our performance in terms of the financials. And then also keep looking forward all of the time of how we can improve our business. But it's always at our mind all of the time. And we do an annual appraisal of all of our staff, which we, sit down and talk about the direction of the business at the time. We have team meetings through the year where we have a debrief at end of harvest. Just ask ourselves really honestly, what has worked this harvest? What hasn't worked? And you can imagine after a wet autumn the last 2 years, it's quite a few things where we come up against challenges. And it's amazing some of the ideas that you get from the team, there are things that we can actually put into practice as well. So I think it's part of the whole team really to look at the strategy and what we want to do because, guys are there all the time, day to day, working the machinery, working the land, they understand what we could do to actually be better. So whole team approach.
Hmm. Let's take that idea and hone in on the arable enterprise. We've already mentioned your soils, the estate soils vary significantly. So what about tailoring your management practices to those different soil types? A lot of people will be driven by their mapping, and that will dictate your practice. What dictates your practice?
Many, many different aspects. So first of all, we have a range of soil types, like you say. Our farm down in West Berkshire has a range from anything from gravel to clay caps to chalkland. Up in Lincolnshire, predominantly on the Lincolnshire Wolds, we have a lot of calcareous chalks. And then we've got heavy land going up to the Humber Bank. So we tend to run 3 different rotations. So we can look at the performance of those 3 individual land types in terms of gross margin performance, physical performance. And then we Obviously, we yield map everything we do at harvest time, but we've tried to pull that actually now into like a 5-year gross margin map. So rather than just looking at an individual yield of a field, actually look at the performance of that field over the complete rotation. Um, and that identifies areas which are continually lower performing, that identifies areas which are higher performing. In terms of variable rate, we use variable rate technology on the farm, but we're trying to use that now to, rather than chasing soil indices, trying to pinpoint actually yield potential of the different soil types. So, if we've got some nice chalkland on the top, it can do 12 tonne a hectare, we will feed it for 12 tonne a hectare. If it's on a red chalk slope, steep slope, red chalkland, north facing, the best it can do is kind of 7 tonne. Then we only feed it for 7 tonne a hectare.
So give us an idea of your cultivation strategy again in the 2 different sites as well.
Yeah, I suppose that's quite an interesting question, Ben, because when I started the company back in 2011, we had drilled 25% of the farm that year with a direct drill. And it was the company's aspiration, but we were going to convert another 25% of the area each year. And within 4 years, we're going to be 100% direct drilling. Unfortunately, though, we had made a few mistakes. I suppose we tried to go from just a primary cultivation and almost flick a switch to go to 100% direct drilling. And it didn't work for us. We had the wet autumn of 2012. It really didn't work for us. I'm not against direct drilling at all. We do quite a lot of direct drilling today, but back then, I don't think we had the right type of drill and our soils weren't ready for it. And I don't think we had the right crop rotation as well. So we almost had to come back to the drawing board in 2013. We almost had to start again. And we then started this kind of what I call a transition, that we went into a minimal tillage with using a tine cultivator at the time. And then over the years, those cultivations have got more and more shallower. We're now using what I call a managed wheeling system. So I wouldn't say we're a true CTF, but we are 6, 12, and 36 meter wheelings. Everything is locked in on RTK. And we found that as we've got those disciplines in terms of field management and trafficking, but all of the land in between has enabled us to shallow up our cultivations. So now a lot of our machines are 12-meter cultivators at a shallow depth, and we haven't seen any drop off in yield. So we're very pleased where we are. The aspiration was that was going to be our transition, and one day we would end up being 100% direct drilling. But to be honest with you, with the fluctuations in weather we've seen over the last few years, we seem to be very happy where we are. It's a very fluid approach where we can shallow cultivate, we can direct drill, we can min-till, and if we really have to, we could plough.
In terms of trialing different systems as well, do you have a strategy if you just go you go all in on it, because you're talking across quite a large area anyway in terms of capacity? What would a trial look like for you in terms of acreage?
We would trial on different soil types. So if we're going to have a trial, we'd trial on different soil types in different parts of rotation, just to build our confidence in what we're doing. At the end of the day, you have got to just go out there and try it, and don't be afraid of making mistakes. We always say in this team, if we're not making mistakes, we're not trying hard enough. But as long as you learn by your mistakes.
And also, dare I say, you could do a trial in 1 year and exactly the same trial with the same variables the year after, and depending on a whole host of different issues, you could get a different result.
Yeah, you could. We spent a lot of time on the farm with Philip Wright. Philip Wright comes out and looks at all of our soils. There's a lot of training across our whole team, really. And it comes down to making a decision. As soon as a combine goes across the field, go out with a spade, dig a hole, have a look at the soils, and then make your decision. You can't sit here in the wintertime and plan your cultivations. You really can't.
What about the less profitable parts of your land, the less productive parts? What's your approach to those?
Well, we've always been quite heavily, due to the family, we've always been quite heavily involved in conservation. So over 10% of our area is put aside for conservation measures. Originally, that was countryside stewardship and HLS, then countryside stewardship mid-tier, now SFI. So we kind of follow through that journey, really. So yeah, just for instance, if you came here in the Lincolnshire estate, every single one of our arable fields has a 6-meter grass margin around the outside. Low performing areas will be put into wild bird seed mixes, pollen and nectar strips, just to try and give us that real nice balance in terms of conservation, and really trying to balance conservation and protection of a fabric of the estate against commercial farming at the same time. And I do think the two go hand in hand.
What's your take on SFI in comparison to previous schemes?
SFI has been, for us, it's been quite a useful exercise because actually it's complemented a lot what we were already doing. So we have been cover cropping now for the last 9 or 10 years. And now obviously we're getting paid to do so. So that's quite good. So we've been direct drilling for a number of years. So it's helping us, it's supporting that as well. So we see it as being very complementary to what we're doing. But the moment on the farm, we use SFI as rotational options, and all of our fixed options are in countryside stewardship still on mid-tier.
Just talking briefly about some livestock. So the estate is home to Lincoln red cattle, also North Country mules, your sheep. And just going back to this idea of circular farming, I suppose, are they an integral part of that?
Yeah, they are. So originally, land was taken out of production, out of arable production, put down to grass under our HLS system. But they were two very individual enterprises. And I wouldn't say there was any integration. There was grazing cattle and grazing sheep on grassland. There was arable land or combinable crops on arable land. But in recent years, there started to be more integration. Sheep graze some of our cover crops through the wintertime when weather conditions allow. And next year, we are hoping to put forage crops in for our cattle before spring crops as well. Beef margins have been very good in recent years. But I think we all know that, to reduce the cost of cattle, actually, if you can keep them outside for longer, it's better for cattle, and also it reduces their cost of production. So we're hoping to outwinter some of our spring calving cows next winter on forage crops.
Let's move on to the part of the show where we talk about you and your career journey. Give us an idea of how you got to this point.
So I'm a farmer's son from Buckinghamshire. I was the youngest out of two sides of the family, so I decided rather than going back into the family business to actually go my own way. I started my farming career with Bidwell's as a young trainee assistant farm manager. I spoke to some of the other farm management companies at the time, but I went with Bidwell's. It was on a local estate to home. It was heavy land, combinable crops. And after about 18 months, 2 years there, I decided it was not dissimilar to what we had always done at home. Decided to broaden my horizons, and I came up to Lincolnshire in 2001 as an assistant farm manager on the Reevesby estate. It was a great opportunity for me. It was working alongside a farm manager who really wanted me to look after the day-to-day running of the farm so he could concentrate really on the commercial aspects of it. It was farm at the time, growing a lot of sugar beets, a lot of potatoes, had a lot of breeding sheep. So a real diverse role and a great footprint for me into farm management. I then took over on that farm as farm manager in 2004. And then in 2011, I suppose I was at that point of my career, I was looking for my next challenge. We made a lot of changes at Reevesby. The farm was established. It was running very well. Heard about the job opportunity here at Sutton Estates. And after 3 interviews, I was offered the job. And I started here back in 2011. Originally, I was just looking after the Lincolnshire estate. And then in 2013, I stepped up and started looking after the estate down in West Berkshire, and then became a company director in 2018. So it's been quite an interesting journey for me.
Okay, so and actually just pausing there. So before that point in 2013, was this the first point that the entire estate, as it were, was managed it by one?
Yes, it is. Yes, yeah, and really, Ben, we did that to try and get the economies of scale. So before the business obviously was aware that we had a sister farm down in West Berkshire, but there's no consistency in terms of our approach. We're not saying one was right and one was wrong, but we just saw the opportunity for economies of scale actually by just being more consistent in what we do in terms of purchasing fertilizer, seed, crop protection products, machinery, to run a same machinery replacement policy as well. So we could streamline that across the whole business. So yeah, we made quite a few changes there, and I think it was the right thing to do. We've seen an increase in our profitability, but it certainly enables us to protect our business, especially against the rising costs that we're seeing at the moment. So yeah, we believe we're in a good place.
Now, you have been nominated in the past for Arable Farm of the Year. You were also awarded Farm Manager of the Year at the 2017 Farmers Weekly Awards. The Arable Farm of the Year nomination was back in 2010. What does that mean to you? And how has that sort of influenced your career?
What does that mean to me? I suppose really it was 2017 was great for me and my team. We made a lot of changes since I'd been here at the business. We'd gone through quite a major restructuring at times. And it was just great to be able to take the whole team down to London and actually say, this wasn't just my award, this was everybody's award, really. Um, it was a very, very enjoyable night out.
I bet it was. And just focusing again on that sort of farm management side, and I'm guessing you also know a lot of other farm managers. You've been in this role for a long time. If you were speaking to your younger self, I'd say, so either imagine that or a younger sort of fresh farm manager going into a new role, what would your approach be, and what would your advice be to someone starting out?
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity. There is a huge amount of opportunity in agriculture at the moment. At the moment, there's a lot changing in the farming world. There's a lot of challenges, but also there's a lot of excitement in terms of artificial intelligence coming in, precision farming techniques. So, the skill set is changing all of the time. Yeah, I would welcome anybody into the industry. And that's something we do across our business. We have apprenticeships, we take on placement students, we take on ex-graduates as well. Yeah, and trying to help people and mentor them into their career. And, we're not afraid to develop and train people up. And if they leave us, we wish them well and hopefully keep in touch. So, but my advice to anybody at the moment would be buy a plane ticket, go and have a look around the world and see what others are doing and bring that back to you. And I think that is important actually, that, we're a leaf demonstration farm up here in Lincolnshire. Something we do enjoy doing is just sort of sharing knowledge, bringing people out onto the farm, talking about what we're doing. I'm not saying that everything we do is right, but it's just interesting hearing other people's experiences. And I take a lot of enjoyment from that, just talking to people, seeing what they've done, telling them, being honest with them and showing them what we've done here on the farm, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and just sharing that knowledge. So, and I think that's something we need to do within the industry.
Yeah, and I mean that's almost within the industry, but also to outside as well. You've been doing Open Farm Sunday for many years as well.
Yeah, we have. We've been doing Open Farm Sunday here for many, many years, and it's become very successful. We're lucky. We're supported on the day. We've been doing it now, I think, for 14 years, and a lot of the helpers and supporters on that day have helped us since day one. So they all kind of know what we're doing. They know our expectations, but everybody enjoys it. I'll be honest with you. The days leading up to Open Farm Sunday, we probably all question why we're doing it year after year. But actually, on the Monday morning, the Sunday afternoon, the Monday morning, once you start to get all the feedback back, I think it is very worthwhile doing. And yeah, it's something we're proud of doing. So I think it's good. It's good for the local community, but also it's just promoting UK farming, what we're doing here on the farms.
Hmm. Let's talk about challenges. What are your major challenges as a farm manager today, and how have those compared throughout other times in your career?
Wow. Well, where do you start? Where do you start? At the moment we're sat down, it's middle of winter, so we're starting to do our forecast for next year. Well, I suppose one of the biggest challenges really is lack of clarity in terms of regulations, but also rising costs all of the time in all areas. Labour's going up, but I think we're always quite happy to pay people for what they do. Cost of machinery is going up all of the time. Input costs are going up. And I think that squeeze is really on the farmer. If I look at the price of wheat, it's no dissimilar to really where we were 5 years ago. I think if we go back to the 1980s and then add inflation, wheat prices, commodity prices are nowhere near where they should be. And it just feels that, all the other industries can pass on their cost to the farmer, but the farmer can't pass on their cost to anybody else. I think if I picked up my local grain trader and said, my costs have gone up by 9%, can I have another 9% of my wheat price? I think it'd be a very short conversation. But, that's a challenge we've just got to be aware of. We're in a global market. We've got to see what our competitors are doing and learn from them and just make ourselves more and more efficient all of the time.
Mm. So in the short to medium term, if you're being squeezed, where's the give? What has to give in that situation?
Well, that's the big question. That's what we're trying to look at the moment. I suppose for us, straight away, it would be, take out the lower performing land. If it's not performing in the current price equation, take that land out of production, put it into SFI or alternative use. And there is opportunity for that at the moment. And then it's really looking at efficiency in terms of our physical performance. Is there anything we can do there to make our farms more efficient? I'm not always saying that we need to increase yield, but look at nitrogen use efficiency. That's something we've had a trial on the farm for the last 4 years, looking at different rates of nitrogen, justifying some of our input costs. Do we need to put all of those costs on? Last year, we had a crop of wheat down on our farm in West Berkshire. It received 80 kilos of fertilizer and one fungicide. The margin, the gross margin of that crop was comparable to some of our best yielded fields on the farm. So I think there's a lot of things we just need to keep looking at all of the time, but it comes down to data, comes down to time.
Talking of squeezed budgets as well, I mean, an estate of your size will have had a significant BPS payment in the past. I mean, that's a lot of money to find. How have you approached that challenge?
Well, when I started here 10 years ago, 12 years ago, our farming focus back then, laid to me by the chairman, was that we wanted a sustainable farming model to farm without subsidy support. So from that day, we always put BPS right at the bottom of our budget, and we would look at everything in terms of enterprises and farm profitability, and then just put BPS on the bottom of it. So we've been lining ourselves up for that change for many, many years. And we are virtually there. We are there now. We are profitable without subsidy support. So, but not every year, because now we are truly open to price fluctuations, and weather as well. That's something else we can't control.
What are your ambitions for the farm over the next, let's say, because it's very difficult to sort of put timeframes on anything at the moment because things seem to change so often. But let's say sort of the next 5 to 10 years, where would you like the business to be in that time?
Really, I would like to further accelerate the changes we've already started to make. Yeah, just adding more value within the farm business, just become more and more efficient if we can, and just keep on the good work we've started. I'm very excited about circular farming systems, and I don't always like to use the regenerative farming label because sometimes that's used as a marketing label. But, I think there's going back to basics, really moving away from reliance of artificial inputs, looking at our soil health, looking at crop rotations, bringing livestock in as well to support us. Yeah, I think that's very exciting and a lot to do. A lot to do. A lot to learn.
Without wanting to go down the regenerative rabbit hole, but it does seem to come up in every conversations that we have on the podcast. So I don't know why this is going to be any different. We started really by talking about your soils, so I want to almost finish by doing that. When you have that range of soils, you're obviously going to be looking at a range of cultivation strategies in your arsenal. So how does that fit with I know you're not going to use the word regenerative or regenerative strategy, but you're sort of going in that way anyway. So how does that fit?
Yeah, I think really, Ben, it comes back to good farming practice, doesn't it? Farming kind of had 2 decades or 3 decades of really relying heavily on artificial inputs. Through the late 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, artificial inputs were very successful, and farmers soon learned that actually the more fungicide they apply to the crops, the bigger the yield, the more they can invest the following year. And then rotations got shortened because farmers made commercial decisions. And I'm not critical of that because they were commercial people being driven by commercial reasons at the time. But we've now learned that actually we've depleted our soils, we've built resistance, and now we're having to come back to actually look at good basic farming principles to unravel some of that damage we've done.
Let's start to round things up. And I always finish the show with the same 2 questions that I'm going to ask you now. The first is, if you had a message for the public, Chris, any message, what would it be?
Well, please support UK farmers, because actually, when you look around the globe, I think we produce food to as high a standard as anybody, if not higher standards. And UK farmers really need the support now. There's a lot of challenges out there. And you could argue that food has been too cheap for too long, and we now need support.
And your message for your fellow farmers?
Keep up the good work. I suppose really to any farmer, it's, we're all under the same challenges. I think it's very good for people to talk. I think it's very good for people to share their frustrations and also share what has worked on their farms as well.
We will leave it there. But a big thank you to my guest, Chris Baylis, for coming on the show. Thank you also for listening. Next time, we'll be on another estate down in Wiltshire, and I'll be speaking to Robin Aird. But for now, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers, and thank you very much for listening. Meet the Farmers is brought to you by RuralPod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations, and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. RuralPod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast. You're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk.